So in this next subtopic, we are looking at something called the determinants of working capital. Now, what are determinants? The other word for determinants is factors determining working capital or working capital requirements. So what does this mean? Now we know we require working capital. It's a given. It's not something that we can debate upon. Every business requires working capital, that is for sure. Now there are certain factors which decide how much working capital we are going to need in the business. Like at any given point of time, is our requirement for working capital going to be less? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be a lot? How to decide how much working capital will be needed, that is decided based on certain factors. That means certain things happen or certain things exist in our business. The nature of our business can be such, or certain things may come up as a result of some uncertain activities, because of which our working capital requirement is going to fluctuate. So how do we decide, or what factors decide how much working capital is required? Okay, and these factors are going to differ from one firm to another. What applies to manufacturing firms may not be the same as what applies to trading businesses or service oriented organizations. It's different for also small scale and large scale organizations, right? Each firm is different, each firm works differently, but we have a very standard or certain factors that do influence the need for working capital for all types of businesses. Okay, let's see these points one by one. First of all, we have the very general nature of the business itself. Now, what do I mean by general nature of business? It means what is the conduct or what is the type of business you're conducting. Is it a service organization? Is it a trading business? Is it a manufacturing business? Depending upon what is the nature and what type of business you're doing, your working capital requirement will also differ. Let's see how. Say you are a service organization, okay, a service industry, and service industries, as we know, they don't involve manufacturing of goods, right? In some cases they involve both providing of service and providing of products. For example, hotel industries, they are a sort of mixture of both products and services. They give you service of providing rooms and accommodation, as as well as at the same time they provide you goods as well in the form of food or beverages, right? Now, let's take other service industries like insurance business or banking business. In this case, the working capital requirement of such service industries is always going to be lesser, all right? Or even take telecom for that matter. Why? These businesses require lesser inventory, very low levels of inventory. For example, telecom businesses, they don't require day-to-day raw material. They have fixed assets in the form of their towers, their cable lines, their Wi-Fi technology, everything that they provide in the form of the fixed assets or the capital assets. But as inventory, on a day-to-day basis, they don't need to buy and sell stock. So lesser requirement of inventory, therefore lesser requirement of working capital as well, right? In their case, another thing to note is most of the sales are in cash. In case of service industry, there is hardly credit basis. Like for example, somebody lives in a hotel and checks out in a few days. You cannot allow credit to the person. You cannot tell the person, okay, pay me after 10 months, right? The person, as soon as he uses the service, has to provide you the money, has to pay you the money. So the cash sales are more in case of service industries, right? Even transportation. If you go by bus or you travel by train or plane, you have to pay then and there. There is no credit service in case of transportation, isn't it? So when regular cash comes into the business, your working capital is not as much required because cash is there. Cash is quickly getting converted and circulated, right? So service industries require lesser working capital. So what about trading and manufacturing type of businesses? These type, they rely on large inventories. They buy a lot of stock on a day-to-day basis. They carry out a lot of production. They have a lot of finished goods and work in progress stock. So they require, a lot of working capital as well. The requirement for their working capital will be much higher than in the case of service industries. And what about sales? Trading and manufacturing businesses normally function a lot depending upon credit sales. They rely a lot on credit sales because manufacturing businesses, they allow 2 months, 3 months, 4 months credit period to their customers to pay as and when possible, right? They make agreements, they make bills of exchange, they make those promissory notes saying that the amount for the sale can be paid after a certain period of time, all right? So that in that case, since there are so much credit sales, and what does credit sale means? That the cash will come back into the business after a very long time, like 3 months, 4 months, and so on, isn't it? So in that case, working capital requirement is more because all your cash is stuck in the goods, in the products that you have manufactured, right? So you have manufactured, you've already sold, you've given it to the customer, but the customer is still not paid. So you will need a lot of working capital for your other expenses. If you don't have cash, how will you pay salaries or wages or any other expenses, right? So in that case, working capital requirement also goes up if you are a trading and manufacturing type of business, right? I hope this first point was clear. Very similar to that, similar to our trading businesses, manufacturing businesses, we have the next point that determines how much working capital we are going to require, and that is the production cycle, okay, or the manufacturing cycle as we call it. So what is this manufacturing cycle and how does it go? That is the entire time taken for our raw materials to become finished goods. So the raw materials will first become work in progress, right? When they have already entered the process of production, they are halfway done, half processed, and they are still waiting to get completed, right? And then finally we convert them into finished goods, like proper finished packaged goods that are ready to be sent out to the customers to be sold, isn't it? So this is called a production cycle. The time taken for converting the raw materials into finished goods is our production or manufacturing cycle. Now what happens here, when you have a production cycle, your cash is also getting stuck, or it is getting trapped or tied up in the manufacturing process. Now how is that? Raw materials are purchased with the help of cash, coming back to our operating cycle, isn't it? So the moment you use cash to purchase those raw materials, your cash is stuck here. Then it gets stuck in the form of work in progress. Then it gets stuck in the form of finished goods. And only when you sell those finished goods, that time it is going to get converted back into cash, right? So the longer the production cycle, the larger will be the funds tied up and the larger will be the working capital requirement. So let's say your production cycle, this is your production cycle, okay? Let's say this production cycle is of at least 3 months. Like say for example, if you're manufacturing a car, it takes a lot of time. So let's say the production cycle is 3 months, right? And in another example, the production cycle is just 1 day. That is, your raw materials take only 1 day to get produced into finished goods. Fine. Now, out of these, which of these will have a higher working capital requirement? Yes, in this case, the longer the production cycle, the more or higher will be the working capital requirement, because cash is stuck in the entire production cycle. You have to wait 3 months till you get that cash back. So within those 3 months, you will need a lot of working capital for other expenses, to buy more raw materials, to pay off salaries, to pay off all other expenses. You're going to need a lot of working capital. But when your working or production cycle is just like, let's say, 1 day, your working capital requirement will also be very less, right? Because you quickly are able to convert your raw material into finished goods and get your cash back. Let's take, for example, say you have, in the first case, let's take a distillery company, all right, one that produces alcohol. Now, alcohol, as we know, is a very long process. Aging of that alcohol takes a very long time. The distillation and then keeping that alcohol. There are some wines and alcohols which are hundreds of years old even, isn't it? So that aging process takes a lot of time. By the time they're manufactured and they're sold, it's a big time gap, isn't it? Whereas you take the example of simple businesses like a bakery. You buy all the raw materials today, all your flour and sugar and everything. You manufacture the next morning and you're sold out. Like all your goods are sold out the next morning itself, isn't it? And you get your cash back. Whatever amount you have spent on those raw materials, you tend to get it back. So the production cycle for a bakery is so much more shorter, it's so much more lesser, such that you are able to get your cash back as instantly as possible. Alright. So for today, we just do only these two factors or determinants. So one is depending upon the nature of the business, as to what type of business you are running, and one depends on how long the production cycle is.